Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, I want everyone to make sure that you give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Lauren Clark on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Wisconsin, which, I'm really testing my mental limits today having someone from Wisconsin on. But, hey, you got to include everyone. And you're probably originally she wasn't born in Wisconsin, so that makes it a tad bit better. But, this is like the sixth person I've had on that's coming to us from Wisconsin. Every day, every time I have that, a little bit, my soul dies a little bit. But she's a personal trainer, and she's here to discuss her health and fitness journey on here, and also what things have been like for her during this pandemic. Because good God, we've heard so many stories like that. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Lauren, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, absolutely. And I gotta say, what's the weather like in Wisconsin today?
It's actually a beautiful day. It's like sunny and 75. Can't complain at all.
Well, that's one of the good things I like about having people that are close to me on is that we do have generally the same weather where it's basically like the same here. But did you guys, so like last week we had a really bad hailstorm where we were getting like golf ball sized hail. Did you guys have that as well?
So I was actually down in back in Illinois by my parents, and we didn't get the hail that you guys got. We got a lot of rain though. Like a lot of people lost power. But here where we're at in Wisconsin, we just got rain and it blew past us, thankfully. But yeah, my uncle actually had a tree limb fall on his truck, so there was a little more damage down south than up here.
Well, hey, but talking to people from the West Coast, I'd much rather have that than the earthquakes that they talk about. But before we get into our winter weather or our weather woes, because I was gonna say I'm gonna have a podcast in and of itself where it's just gonna be my winter weather stories, and that's a 10-hour long podcast. But why don't you give us your backstory on what really inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to where you're at right now?
So it started off growing up. I played softball my whole entire life. I did club, and then I was in travel for a long time, played high school varsity. And then I just kind of realized that I didn't love it as much as I used to. It wasn't a passion of mine anymore. And so I didn't continue to play in college. I went to Illinois State University, and I wanted to focus more on my academics and whatnot. But then once I got there, I realized that I have no structure. I didn't know what life was outside of sports. So I pretty much, my focusing on academics turned into me going out and binge drinking all the time and making a lot of really poor decisions. And I felt like crap, and I hated it, and I hated myself and what I was doing. My grades were slipping really bad. And then probably halfway through my sophomore year, I would say, I found a friend of mine. She was like, "Hey, let's go to the gym." And I was like, "Okay, cool." We walk into the weight room that's, of course, filled with boys, and I'm terrified. But from the first day I walked in there and I did my first lift, I kind of never looked back, and I've been going ever since. And from there, worked out on my own for a while. Then I found a coach. Then I got into some personal training and bodybuilding and everything, and it's been smooth sailing from there.
I've always said it's so fascinating. When I was in college too, they would have the track upstairs and then the weight room downstairs, and up on the track it would be 90% female, and a couple of guys that were doing cardio, and then same thing in the weight room where it's 95% guys, and you'd have like those 2 or 3 brave women that were down there, doing their thing. So I always do, find that fascinating. But that also comes along with that myth that we talked about before we started this podcast, that is the number one myth that I love to bust, and it's it's gotten better the last 5 years, and there still, unfortunately, are so many women that have that fear that, if they walk into the gym and they pick up one weight, they're going to put on, 50 pounds of muscle. And again, if that does happen to you, give me a call. But it's never happened. I don't think I'm just spitting it out there. I don't think it's ever happened. But did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, being that you're a personal trainer now, I bet you still hear that all the time. How do you like to respond to that?
So, I just respond with straight facts. Yes, I do. I hear it all the time. And I just respond with facts. A woman's body doesn't work that way. You would have to be eating so much gosh darn food that you'd be sick to your stomach to be able to even look anywhere close to a man. And then on top of that, of course, I think they're looking at the beauty that is women's physique. Like, I'm not saying that they look manly or gross at all, but obviously to a normal general population female, most women don't want to look like that. And people have to understand that there's so much work, so many years and time and dedication that goes into that just going on a regular basis to the gym and lifting weights won't make them look like that. So yeah, I hit them with facts. And for me, I never worried about it. I think I always kind of admired the physique of men and women, and I played softball, so I kind of already had that muscular build anyway. And for me, it was just like I started to see like muscle tone and I started to feel more confident. And it became a really quick addiction for me to see that those fast changes. So I never really worried about looking manly. And now if I look manly, you think I look manly, then so be it. I don't care. I like how I look. So,
I always say if you think that that looks manly, then what kind of men are you hanging out with?
right.
That's what I want to know. That's what I was, because yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But the one thing that always say impacts women so much more than it does men is that confidence boost that working out gives you. I mean, we've heard so many stories on this podcast of women who have either made life changing decisions that's just helped them maybe be a little more assertive, or it just helped benefit every single aspect of their life. And I always say that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and impact every aspect of your life. How have you personally taken that confidence boost that working out's given you and used that to have a positive change on yourself?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I could talk hours and hours about this. The gym, I mean, quite literally saved my life. I went through really bad depression. I had anxiety for a while, and it got to I mean, I was in like the lowest of low points to where like the gym was the only thing that really pulled me out of it. And bodybuilding really is what saved me. It put structure in my life. It created a goal that I was able to attain that makes me feel good. Um, and now going into post graduation and post college and like my actual career and being able to be confident in offering my personal training abilities or just advice in general to young women or men, whoever it is, I feel confident being able to give them good advice and help them, and that in turn makes me feel even better. And so it's just kind of in every way, shape, or form, it's made me a more confident, like I think, well-rounded person.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's just so many more benefits than just the physical benefits. I mean, the mental benefits as well just vastly, vastly outweigh, the a lot of the benefits that people think that they see when it comes down to the sport. But I always say, when you first get started working out, I mean, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to, I mean, their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to that overall package that people end up seeing. What was that experience like for you, sort of figuring out what worked best for your body? Because if you were to walk up to someone and say, hey, what'd you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you.
Right. No, exactly what you said. I mean, everyone's got a story. Everyone has a different story. And health and fitness, there is not one size fits all whatsoever. There's not even fit. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear. There's not even like 50 sizes that fit whoever. But it was all trial and error. I mean, I went in every single day and I would try new workouts. I tried what worked for me. And for the most part, when I first started, I think that it was a lot of more Instagram fads or YouTube fads, and like some of the workouts I did were good, some of them were my form wasn't the best, obviously. My workouts, but I was trying to do as heavy as I could for as many reps as I could, and the more that I did it, the more that I learned. And for me, it was pretty much all trial and error.
I've seriously been considering trying to change the name of this podcast to Trial and Error, because that's a theme that we discuss, so much on this podcast. But I love to talk genetics on the podcast too, because so many people in this day and age where, social media and everyone being on it, a lot of people don't realize that, you can only look the best version of yourself. Like, they see so many people online and they're like, oh, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back. That's not going to work. I mean, you don't know how they got to that look. You don't know, their whole backstory. But I always say, when someone first gets started in the gym, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off, that they don't have to train as much. And then they have that one body part that just lags behind it. They have to train to oblivion, basically, to get it to catch up. I mean, I'll give you my examples. I'm 6'3", so my lower body is just absolutely shot, where I mean, I had to train it into oblivion, and it still doesn't even work. I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they wouldn't grow an ounce. But my back, just because I had jobs all throughout college of being in warehouses and, lifting and loading boxes, you either got a really nice back or you quit. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Definitely my back and my legs. My legs were kind of the opposite here. My legs, I mean, I had softball girl legs, so I have, if anything, it's harder to get them conditioned because they've just been so massive for so long. But yeah, my legs definitely started pretty big. And then I would say my back was one that I didn't have to train as much. And now it's more just adding those little details that the judges want to see. But yeah.
See, I had that baseball pitcher body where it was just long and lanky because you had to be. So yeah, it's just
Hey,
something
it
I
worked
struggle
for
with.
that. It was
Hey,
good for that.
yeah, it really is. I mean, if I would have added maybe about 4 or 5 more inches, I just would have been playing basketball instead. But hey, it worked out. But when it comes down to this, I mean, so many people don't realize that nutrition makes up 80 to 90% of your results. A lot of people don't like to mention that, and I still have friends to this day who still swear by oh, if I work out 5 times a week, I can eat whatever I want and I'll get away with it. And it's like, well, yeah, because we're 25 now, so yeah, maybe that might work now, but 10, 10 years from now, good luck. But what were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you made when you first got started?
So when I first got started, I immediately went into like macro counting, and I figured out my own macros. And I granted, I stopped going out so much, so I didn't have like drinking calories or eating food while I was drunk, those kind of calories. And I was still in the dining hall. Like I was still living in the dorm, so I only had dining hall food, which was kind of interesting for a while. But I mean, they had like grilled chicken there, so I would always have a grilled chicken. I was bringing like a food scale with me to like weigh everything out, and just eating like really like as least processed food as I possibly could, like yogurts, eggs, fruits, the like little deli sandwiches or grilled chicken, stuff like that. And it was just kind of like that switch from eating the crab rangoon and quesadillas to eating that even without the macro counting, it obviously would have done something. But yeah, and like the macro thing too was all just trial and error as I went. And yeah.
I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I remember, just pigging out on all those hamburgers that they had at our meal place where I went to school. I mean, that was ridiculous. But at what point in your journey did you really take a serious look at bodybuilding and you're like, hey, I might give that a try?
I would say probably a year into lifting. I kind of was just scrolling through Instagram and I saw these girls that were doing these shows and not even knowing really what it was, but I was like, they're wearing these sparkly suits, they're doing this, and I was like very intrigued by it. And the more I learned about it, the more I was just like, I want to do that. And my boyfriend, who is still my boyfriend now, but him back then, he he lived in Wisconsin, so he knew my coach, and he's the one that hooked us up. And then once I met my coach, it was kind of like done deal from there. I competed, I think, what was it, like 6 or 7 months after meeting him. And once I hit that stage, it was kind of that's where my life was headed. I just knew.
So when you're getting ready for that first prep, because I always say for the general public that maybe isn't that informed, is that, I mean, 95% of the population couldn't get in shape enough to be able to even go on a prep. But I mean, once you go on a prep, everything just becomes so scientific where I mean you have to eat this certain amount of food at a certain amount of times, you have to get all of your workouts in. I mean, it just becomes so strict and it adds, I mean, when you're talking structure, I mean, this and the military is probably two of the most structured things that you can have in your life. But what was that like for you that first time really going through it? Because for so many people, I mean, we have a wide variety of answers. Some really struggle with it, some you know not necessarily thrive in it, because if you do thrive in a prep, I really think you're an insane person. But what was that experience like for you going through it for the first time?
Well, with all that being said, I think that people that want to just get in shape, like you said, like 90% of the population like can't get in shape for a prep. I think that just getting in shape, like people need to realize that this is the extreme. So like even when I have general population that come to me, like I don't want them to say that they want to look like me. I mean I'm absolutely flattered when they do, but I want them to look good for them. And I mean I have clients that I've only been working with for a couple months now and they look phenomenal. And they look good because they're them. Like they don't look good because they look like me, if that makes sense. Um so I think getting ready for my first prep, I was really excited. I was really eager, and I wanted everything to be so perfect. And in hindsight, I think that I was pretty much a dick on my first prep. I was like, I definitely pulled the like, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that. I ate off my diet. I missed some cardio sessions. I kind of like I didn't really know what to expect going into it, and it was a learning as you go process. And I'm happy that I made those mistakes in that one to be able to go on and learn from it and get better in my next ones. But yeah, the first one was definitely a big learning curve process to go through.
Well, and I mean, one thing that is never talked about on here that I think is, just so important because it's one of those things that I would have never guessed in a million years is the hardest thing for a lot of these competitors is the posing. I mean, we've heard so many times it's harder than the working out, it's harder than the nutrition. I mean, I like to compare it now to being a perfect driver where you can be a great driver, you can never be a perfect driver, you can be a great poser, you can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What was your experience with posing like?
Okay, so posing is absolutely one of the hardest things. I feel like I sweat more when I pose, and I'm more sore from posing than I am anything else. Um, I think that because posing, you can practice your stage presence, but once you actually get up on stage, it's a whole new ball game because now you have the lights, you have the judges in front of you, you have people watching you, you're nervous, and those are the things that you can't practice. And so once you get nervous, then once you get up on stage, you're kind of what all that muscle memory you may have may forget. So I remember my first time going up for prejudging, they told me quarter turn to the right. This is something I've done 100 million times leading up to this moment, and I forgot. I completely blacked out, and I was like, "Oh my god, which way is my right? How do I turn?" And like it took me a second, so it happens, and being able you need to practice so much that your mind just goes on autopilot and you just got to do what you got to do. But yeah, definitely posing is one of the hardest things, and one of my biggest pieces of advice is just practice posing as much as you can. Sure.
Yeah, you can never. That's one thing that we've heard all the time too. But out of your poses that you do, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
Ooh. I have my one side. Which side is it? My right or my left side is like it doesn't look as good as my right side. So I would say my left side pose is my least favorite, and my favorite would probably have to be one of my model poses.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, yeah, we've heard that honestly, model poses, yeah, are one of the more popular ones that we've heard. But I mean, one of the things that is not talked about as well that I always say, don't these competitors go through enough already is them making you have to wear those heels. What is that experience like? Because I mean, posing is hard enough as it is, just doing it bare feet. But with those heels, I mean, that's got to make things a little bit more difficult at least.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, granted, I was always the girl that wore heels out when I was in my little party stage. So, like, I was okay in heels. It definitely, but not that high. So, it definitely, when I'm in the posing room at my gym, I will walk back and forth until I'm dizzy so that I can get a good, like, model strut. But it definitely adds a factor of challenge that is probably unnecessary, but it's fun to be a girl for a day. So, I embrace it.
Hey, I mean, I always said if you ever want to break the internet, make the guys have to wear those heels when they walk out on stage. That would definitely be a sight to see. But as you can tell by my thick Norwegian skin, where I mean I am, even if it's sunny out today, like I can't go outside without an SPF of about 1 billion. Otherwise, I'm gonna get burnt to an absolute crisp, or I'm gonna get farmer's tan. Well, let's be honest, that's not a real tan, but I've never been tan a day in my life. So bodybuilders, that also fascinates me because it's like, oh, just for one day, if I could ever look at that tan, that would be great. But what is that experience like for you when you get that tan on? Because we hear so many stories of people, saying, hey, you really get to see your muscles and you get to see, really that final package. But what is that like when you finally look in the mirror and say, like, oh my God, I got my tan on, I'm good to go?
So the tan is kind of the last step that you take before stepping on stage, and it's a very cool moment to look in the mirror and do your poses once you have your tan on. However, it's so stressful because you don't want to mess it up. And so like there's like that added factor, but that's besides the point. But no, definitely the tan is kind of like your last, like once you get it done, once you're able to get into bed, that's kind of like your okay, I'm relaxed. I've done everything I can possibly do, and I'm just gonna go out there and kill it because like that's all that I can do at this point. And so yeah, the tan for me, it smells so I mean, it smells like spray tan. So like whenever I smell it, it kind of brings in that memory. It's a happy memory, but yeah, I love the tanning process to be honest.
Oh yeah, and one, I mean, too, another thing that is never talked about is that you guys basically have to become like human statues where you can't sit on anything, you can't like lean up against anything. I mean, we got to bring your own bed sheets. I mean, we've heard all those stories, so yeah, it just adds even more, in my opinion, to like just what these athletes have to go through. But what is that moment like when you get to step up on stage and show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months on?
Ugh, a mix between the happiest moment and absolutely terrifying. I think because I'm not as experienced, the show that I'm doing next will only be my third one, and so I don't have as much stage time as a lot of the girls that compete at national shows, and so definitely stepping on stage for, like, my first national show, like, I was not ready. I mean, I was ready, but at the same I wasn't. I was very immature and not as confident as I am going into this next one. So it's super, super fun, and every single time I learn something different, and I learn a better way to just like soak in every single moment from the minute I get backstage to the minute I step off stage and go back out into the general public. I try and just soak up every single minute because, like you said, we spend weeks and weeks preparing for this stuff, and then it's gone in a flash. Like I feel like I blinked and I'm already 2 weeks out from my next show, and so it goes by so fast. I just soak up every single minute that I can.
Yeah, and I would too, because I always say for like all these other sports, like you can know being a softball player, you're going to be on the field for a hell of a long time and you're going to have a lot of games to play. But for bodybuilding, I mean, you do all this work where you work harder than probably you've worked for any other sport, and you're only on stage for like a minute at a time, and you might do it like 2 or 3 times a year at the most. And then you're just like, wow, really? That's for all that. So that even adds more where it's like, geez, that just to be able to go through all of that. But another myth that I really think should be talked about, every single time there's bodybuilders on any social media platform is that, so many people don't understand that look that you guys put on stage is not a sustainable look. You're not going to be able to keep that look 24/7. I mean, we've heard so many times where people are just shocked when they see bodybuilders in off season. They're just like, wow, they do not look like they've ever competed a day in their life. And then it's just, they don't realize that. I mean, I always say it's like shows like Biggest Loser kind of give that myth where it's like they have guests go on there and they lose, like 200 pounds or something. And sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes they're able to keep that weight off. And I think people just assume that with bodybuilders too. It's like, oh, they work just as hard as those people. And, they should be able to probably just maintain that lean look just because if they just keep up with their cardio and all that stuff. But they don't realize I mean, that's the unhealthiest your body's probably going to be at is when you step on that stage. But what was that like when you first figured that out that, like, hey, this body that I have on stage, I mean, it's not going to last as, some people it's even like a couple days afterwards they're already completely gone. But what was that like, and has it gotten easier for you to accept that as your career and as you've done, the extra shows and you're getting ready for the third one?
Oh, definitely. The first 2 shows, so I am really bad with food and wanting to eat everything in sight. So after my first 2 shows, I had a really bad rebounds, and I just couldn't stop eating. I was very food focused, and I think that also stemmed from just, like, other mental things that I had going on. So when we talk about bodybuilding being, like, 90% mental, it really is. Um, but I think that being stage lean is super fun, but it's also the most uncomfortable your body is going to feel. So once you put on a few pounds of fat and you kind of get your energy back, your brain works a little bit better. You're able to like form coherent thoughts with like not having -4 brain cells. Um, that's where you thrive. And I think people, especially bodybuilders who are trying to go pro or are professional, like they know that mindset and they know the importance of that. And it's you just want to be, yeah, you want to be to the point of where you're healthy. I mean, you can still be lean, obviously not stage lean. You can still stay lean and look really good throughout an off season and like have a really good reverse diet. And that's something that it's my biggest goal after this season is just having a really solid reverse diet because I haven't done that yet. Um, but at the same time, having like a rebound phase is also really not healthy for you either because your hormones are going to be all out of whack and just hits the fan from there. I know from experience. So, um, definitely learning and taking or learning from my previous mistakes and taking what I've learned into this next off season and definitely loving my body at every stage of the game. And that's the big goal for me.
I mean, talking about hormones, I had a hormone specialist on, and she was a bodybuilder, but she was also a hormone specialist. I even told her, I was like, I didn't even know that guys had hormones. I thought that was just like I thought that was just like a woman thing because I remember like I was like if anyone ever told me to go and get my hormones checked I'd be like I'm not pregnant, what's up or something. So yeah, that just shows how little I knew about that. But yeah, after our talk I was like, yeah, that's
I just what the I mean, everyone, the female body is, everyone should know this. It's vastly different than the male body, but yeah, what they have to go through, especially in their rebounds and stuff, is 1000% different from what a lot of men have to go through. So that's why I love talking to that, because most people don't understand that there's a huge difference when it comes to building muscle, and also when it comes to maintaining it, and or the changes that go in. But I always say it's just like starting your own business too. You got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle. Those
Absolutely.
they just go hand in hand. But two questions that I love to ask every health and fitness guest that I have on. I mean, bodybuilding, not just bodybuilding, because I've never competed, but just the working out and the getting bigger and stronger has helped me out in so many aspects of my life. But the one negative thing is that you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled water or anything that's sealed on tight. I came back to live with my parents during the coronavirus, and every single time they come home with groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carrying the groceries for them. Has that been a similar experience with you, where like I mean, like, you probably have friends that give you a hard time for it, but do you ever find that like you are getting asked to do stuff more, or you're getting a lot more attention?
Yes, I do. With my so my boyfriend, he hasn't competed yet, but he is also a bodybuilder, and his family, they do a lot of like
Oh
home
God.
renovating projects. So we definitely we help a lot with
Ugh.
stuff like that. Haven't had to in a little while, but there was definitely some moving that we helped with. And when I'm a bartender as well, and I'm always the one that's lifting the crates of beer and putting stock in the beer cooler. And if any, the funniest one is oh, like, don't mess with Lauren, she'll beat you up. And like, if I ever punched anyone, I'd probably be the first one to start crying, because like I couldn't hurt a fly. So I think that's the funniest one, is like when people say like that I could beat them up when I can't at all. But yeah, no, definitely.
Well, and then another question that I like to add on to that is that, I mean, like, I would always say, like, if you're to walk out in public dressed like you are right now, I mean, you're not the average looking woman for at least for, I mean, not even your age. I mean, but it's just I always find that fascinating. What do you find is mainly the general public's reaction to you? Because we get so many times where, I mean, let's just be honest, human beings are curious creatures, and if they see something that's not of the normal, or what they think the normal is, I mean, a lot of the times they just like to look at it and they're just like, oh, that's interesting, that's different. But what what's that like for you? I mean, especially as you get leaned down for a show, I mean, it becomes a whole different beast, because I mean, we've had guests that are like 2 weeks out and they're like, yeah, you're definitely going to get a lot more stares than if you're in your off season. But what's that experience been like for you? Just sort of, realizing that you will stick out sometimes if you're in public.
So it kind of depends on what setting I'm in. Um, if I'm at the gym or around the gym, or even in like gym clothes where it looks like I'm coming from the gym or something, I think I feel a little bit more comfortable. I never really feel uncomfortable getting stares, or if people ask me something, I'm more flattered than anything, because I do put a lot of hard work and time into this. So for them to say something or say I look good, like I'm always very appreciative of that. Um, the only negative thing is like, so I had it one time while I was at work. I was actually clocked in, like on the clock. And then one time while I was out at a bar, where some guys tried to arm wrestle me. And for some reason, that just kind of triggers me a little bit. I'm like, really? And like, after I say no, I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And then they keep going in. So like, I think that's the only time I ever feel really like uncomfortable. But no, otherwise, I'm very appreciative.
My only story somewhat similar to that is that when I mean, I was in a lot better shape in college than I am right now, because I didn't have a job and I didn't have this podcast, but I still work out, 4 or 5 times a week. But I would go to bars sometimes, and there'd just be drunk girls that would just come up and start feeling my arms without even asking. And, but let's be honest, this was the college years, so I'd pump it up for them a little bit. This is the college Ryan is a little bit different than, the 25-year-old, a couple years removed from college Ryan. But, yeah, that's my only thing similar. But my favorite question to ask, because, I mean, I've had male bodybuilders on as well as female bodybuilders, and male bodybuilders just affects enough as it is, but for females, it's 10 times worse, is the clothing options. We have heard hundreds of stories where, I mean, if you're a female bodybuilder, your clothing options are going to be severely limited. I mean, we've heard plenty of stories where, I mean, if you have big, broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend. Jeans are another thing that we hear of all the time, where it's like, good luck finding a pair of jeans if you have a big lower body and a small waist. How have you been able to, sort of compensate for the fact that your clothing options can be limited, and the fact that, I mean, you basically have to have two wardrobes, your prep wardrobe and your off-season wardrobe?
I love how you know all of like the little tiny details that go on behind the scenes, like a prep wardrobe and an off-season wardrobe.
I'm
Like,
talking to like 200. I'm talking to like 200 different bodybuilders. So if I didn't pick this up, I would be a horrible podcaster.
true. Um, Yeah, no, it's so I deal with it by mainly wearing gym clothes all year round, all the time. I mean, I'm pretty much my job as a personal trainer and the fact that I live in a gym, other besides that, I'm always in leggings and tank tops and t-shirts and sweatshirts. So I have a lot of those. But if I do go out, I just find more loose fitting clothes or I mean pretty much ordering online is impossible because I have to try everything on. But yeah, it's tough. I don't go shopping a whole lot, to be honest.
Well, yeah, that's me too. I rarely. I mean, I don't. I can fit and stuff, but I mean, yeah, I just rarely go shopping, ever at all. But I mean, we have to talk about the coronavirus now, just because it's been something that's impacted our lives so much, and especially being a personal trainer. I mean, you've been affected than I think a lot more than a lot of other people's jobs. I mean, and being that you're in the service industry too, so it's been kind of like a double whammy for this whole time. But what has your experience been like with the coronavirus? How has it impacted your personal life?
So at first, I'm not gonna lie, I was enjoying it a little bit, having a little bit of time off just to sit and chill. But that after that initial relaxation time, I was like, wow, I'm so over this. I couldn't work out. I couldn't do anything. I was just sitting inside. I finished like all my cleaning or like DIY projects and then I just got bored. And after that, luckily, Wisconsin is a little bit more lax with Corona than a lot of other states. So when we opened back up, I mean, we opened back up and everything was open. Like I was in the gym the next day after the stay at home order was lifted and it it definitely it sucked while it was down, but now that it's back up, I'm hoping it'll stay that way and I'm able to train normally. And the only thing it has affected is the restaurant is a little bit slower than normal. But luckily, I fingers crossed, knock on wood, it's really good here compared to a lot of other places. So I'm really grateful for what I have right now.
I would completely lie if I didn't say the second weekend that order was lifted, me and a couple of friends didn't get into a car and drove all the way to Hudson, which is like an hour away from us, to go to a bar because everything was shut down here in Minnesota. I would be lying if I said I did not do that. So, but yeah, Wisconsin and drinking. I mean, I couldn't think of any other better thing to compare to Wisconsin. So I mean, I must say you must be pretty close to a millionaire if you're working as a bartender in Wisconsin. I mean, good God, I've been over there.
Yeah.
I've been over there sometimes at like 2 in the afternoon on like a Monday, and that in a place is packed. And I'm like, what's wrong with these people? But hey, it's like we always say,
Culture out here.
that's Wisconsin. But you,
Right.
you know, and thank God you don't have my brain because as soon as the shutdown happened, I was like, oh great, now I can focus everything on the podcast. So I literally have had no time off since this
Yeah,
whole
well,
thing's
that's
been
awesome
going on.
for you.
No, it's not because I am just so after I'm done talking to you, I'm taking a week off. Everyone, I'll still be releasing the podcast, but I'm taking a week off from talking to anyone so I can just relax because I've been furloughed until this first the 2 weeks from now. So I'm literally taking this last week off to just enjoy myself. But yeah, it's been fascinating. But how have you also dealt with it? I mean, with the training aspect, because so many people, especially because the gyms were probably closed for like even almost like a month probably in Wisconsin. But how did you deal with that? Because I mean, so many people, I mean, bodybuilders, the gym is basically like your crack. So how did you go without having access to it?
Yeah, so went on a lot of walks, like a lot of very long walks. And luckily the apartment I live in has like a little tiny gym where it has some free weights and some cardio machines and then one of those like universal cables where it has like a leg extension and a lat pull down and a chest press and so I still got in workouts as best as I could. Obviously, like it was not the same and I was dragging ass through these workouts. But no, I make do with what I had. And then, yeah, once the gyms back opened up, I was just so happy to not be in the little gym anymore.
Oh, I mean, a lot of people got out their broomsticks and a lot of people got out, their bands, which is great. But one thing that I always say about the general public is that so many people want to get in shape, they just lack the knowledge and the tools to be able to get in shape. So, and I always say this is the perfect time for, people to, start because a lot of people still have time off work. A lot of people are, not socializing as much, so they have a lot more free time. And what advice do you have for people that are looking to just get started? Because I mean, I bet you've heard this a million times. The number one excuse that I hear from all these personal trainers is that people say, I just don't have the time. Well, it's like if you use that excuse now, you're a liar because everyone has the time now. But what advice do you have for people that are just looking to get started in shape? Because I mean, there are a lot of gyms now that are still closed down, or then even if the gyms were open, there's still going to be a vast majority of people, I think, that are just too scared to go into a gym just because they know of all the sweating and stuff that goes around, and you never know. But what advice do you have for people just to get started? Because I always find once you take that first step, it becomes so much easier to keep your journey going.
Right. And I think it's people need to create a habit. Like they need to realize that it's not just a fad, it's not just a time. Like you need to create a habit of it and put it into your lifestyle. Um so I would say reach out, like if you have people around you that work out or that you know that like to work out or know things more than you do, reach out to them, see if they want to work out with you or spread the knowledge that they have to you. Um Using resources and even reaching out to other personal trainers, whether that be at your local gym or anything, and just getting some little quick tips and advice is huge. I would say also look on YouTube. There's a lot of like if they're afraid to go into a gym because of coronavirus, which is totally understandable. There's so many good like YouTube cardio workouts or YouTube band workouts or things like that where if they haven't worked out at all, I mean those would be perfect for them because they're not going to be super challenging, and they're also going to be able to walk them through how to do the actual form of all the exercises and whatnot. Um, so I think it's just picking something or writing it down in your phone or putting it in your calendar, whatever your workout is, write it down and then go and do it for one day and just focus on that one day. And then if that goes well, then go to the next day and just snowball after that. Because once it's a habit, you're not going to want to stay away because it'll make you feel so good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I always say just do what she was doing when she started. Just start walking. I mean, if you have both pair of your legs functioning, I mean, go ahead and just start doing that because that's something that I do too. I mean, I'll walk some nights for, just like 100 minutes and just watch a movie while I'm doing it just to keep myself entertained just because I get so bored. But yeah, walking is a great thing to start with. But a question that I asked all the listeners before New Year's this last year was, what's one body part that you're looking forward to growing the most over the next year? And the answers they could choose from were arms, abs, back, shoulders, legs, and calves, because I always say the joke that my calves are I'm like Johnny Drama from Entourage, where I mean I just can't grow calves, but by far I should have known because there's a lot of guys that watch this podcast too that arms won by like the vast majority. So I always got to ask my guests when they come on. So what does an arm day look like for you? Because being a guy, arms basically is how we communicate with each other in the gym. I mean, that's how we size up other people. But so what do you do for your arms?
So I don't do a full arm day.
Oh,
I added into my back days and my shoulder days. Simply because like being a figure competitor, we don't need to have bigger. If I was a physique competitor, it'd be different. But we don't need like we're not judged on the size of our arms. I mainly do it just to get them conditioned so that they look more presentable with everything else. But normally it's a high rep, few maybe like 4 or 5 sets of curls and tricep extensions, and like honestly that's about it.
hey, and that's why I love asking that to especially like figure competitors, because yeah, they don't have to train as much, but yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating. Well, and I always say too, for anyone out there who's looking for that advice, I mean, work on your triceps too. A lot of people don't understand that a good tricep will make a bad bicep look decent. I mean, it has its way, so definitely work that as well. But also when it comes down to this training too during this pandemic and during all this uncertainty, how are you able to keep focused on your goals? Because so many people are just, they're either freaking out or they just, they don't think it's the end of the world, but they're just like, wow, this is just so different that, I just can't comprehend it. How have you been able to maintain like your sanity and still have these goals that you're working towards?
So that's a really good question actually, because it took me a while to kind of figure out the best way to go about it. When quarantine first happened, I was like, oh, what in the heck do I do? But taking it day by day is really the only thing that I'm doing right now because I'm a big stressor and I'm a big planner. So the fact that I couldn't plan anything and kind of really still can't plan a whole lot going into the future because who knows what's going to happen. Just yeah, not stressing myself out over something I can't control. So I focus on the things I can control for one day and then I move on to the next one. And um I mean my big goal, I want to become a professional bodybuilder. So like that goal never changes and I try and always keep that in mind if I feel fatigued or tired or hungry or stressed or whatever. And especially during the pandemic, I mean, that was still my main focus. So just visualizing that happening in my head kept me pretty sane and pretty sort of level headed for the most part.
Well, I'm glad that this podcast was able to at least schedule something for you so that you could have something written down in the schedule. But yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating these times that we're in right now. But along with, just the plans of bodybuilding and what does the future look like? If we were to talk to you like a year from today, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding journey? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved, or where would you like to be at a year from now if we were to talk?
A year from now, I would love to be an IFBB pro figure competitor. Um, Very, very top of my list. I also hope to have a pretty booming business when it comes to personal training and having a really full schedule of clients. And really just, I would hope my career is taking off by then, because bodybuilding is a hobby. It's not, I'm someone that took fitness and made it my career as well, which is kind of goes hand in hand, but they're two separate entities. And I'm working on a nutrition certification, a few of them, and I really hope that I'm able to be doing that and coaching people at some point. But yeah, just
That's awesome. We wish you nothing but the best. And if someone were to walk up to you and say, Lauren, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
oh, hmm, that's a really good question. I would hope the tans would stay better when hit by water. Don't have to worry about pee streaks or anything like that, or splashing. I don't know. That's such a good question.
Here, I'll give you my answer first, and then you can think about it while I'm doing that. So, one
Okay.
thing, first of all, prize money, make it a little bit more too, because I mean, so many people don't realize that for a lot of these bodybuilders, unless you're like the top bodybuilder on the planet, you're not even going to make any money really doing this. I mean, that's why when she says it's a hobby, yes, it is a hobby, because most bodybuilders, 99% of them lose money, doing this. So that just even goes to more where I'm like, God, these are the one athletes that actually lose money just to follow their passion, whereas opposed to, any other athlete if they're at the top of their level. But yeah, and also like make the judging. I mean, I always said if you're compete in shows in back-to-back weekends, one judge might like you a little bit more thicker, that the other judge might want a little bit more softer of a look. So it's always just to make something a little bit more where everyone sort of understands what a baseline for what the criteria is basically looks like. Those would be mine.
Yeah, no, definitely. The subjectivity of the sport is a little daunting at times. Um, I would go along with that. I would say I wish that there was a more baseline. Because I mean, there is the criteria, but like every judge is looking for something different. But that's also kind of what makes the sport awesome, because you have all different types of physiques that go pro, and you get to see all different types of physiques. So like on the flip side, I also love it because you get to look at so much more. Um, I would say maybe the level that people have to get to nowadays, compared to when, I don't know, 10 years ago. It's just evolving into something that could be more and more unhealthy, or could be more, put a lot more pressure on people to take certain things and push their bodies past absolute limits. So I would say maybe that would be the one thing I would change, is kind of just like slow it down just a little bit. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I love this sport.
Well, and yeah, that's one thing that we've heard of all the time too, and that's a whole different topic for a whole nother podcast. So, but yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Oh my gosh, my coach, absolutely. Tim Thompson, coach. He's my coach and my employer, and I absolutely love him to death. And he's an amazing human, got me where I am today. So give him a big shout out.
And that's totally awesome. And is there any show date that you're getting ready for right now, or are you just sort of weighing it? What's that like?
So I'm 2.5 weeks out. I'm doing North Americans in Pittsburgh, and then potentially another one after that. Um, Kind of depending on if shows keep happening in the next few months, where everything's playing it by ear. But hopefully doing 2 this season.
So since I hate cardio, since, you know, even though that's the only thing I do now other than working out, what is your relationship with cardio like these last 2 weeks as you really try to shred down right before the show?
I put on a good jam playlist and I black out. I just get it done and like that's it. Some days it's really really therapeutic and some days it's really hard. And I enjoy it on the therapeutic days and I just get through it as best I can on the hard days.
Yeah, and again, you guys go and check out Lauren. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. I highly, highly recommend it. And I'm just going to warn everyone ahead of time. You will get inspired to work out. You know, stop eating all those Twinkies and get off that couch and, you know, start adapting a more healthy and fit lifestyle. But Lauren, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and, you know, sharing your journey. And we wish you nothing but the best in Pittsburgh. I mean, I think you're going to do great. You know, I mean, it's a show that's, first of all, I think Pittsburgh's really weird because I've been there once and you're literally just like surrounded by hills, so it just feels weird. But that's a whole different tangent. But again, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. Well, again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.